Hey everybody, Daniel from Spacedock here. Now, what do Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic have in common? First of all, I think that they are the finest examples of storytelling in their respective franchises, by quite some margin, and I suspect that under close analysis, it might be for a lot of the same reasons. Without meaning to denigrate Star Wars or Star Trek, both of which have a great deal of excellent stories within their IP, I don't think it would be unfair to say that Deep Space Nine and Knights of the Old Republic are both better than the franchises they're a part of, and they've only been able to achieve this through a very specific set of circumstances that have created this kind of golden opportunity for brilliant science fiction. Now, what I mean here is that both KOTOR and Deep Space Nine are attacks on the ideology and the central principles of their parent franchises. They hold the assumptions of the audience, built over years of enjoying this franchise, to account and analyze the things that they've come to consider normal. For instance, Knights of the Old Republic is, at least at its core, and especially in KOTOR 2, a critical analysis of the simplistic binary morality of Star Wars. KOTOR 2 goes so far as to vilify the Force by portraying it as a sort of sinister influence that pulls people towards one destiny or the other and essentially deprives the world of free will in its constant quest for a kind of balance that it may never fully achieve.
The Force binds all things. The slightest push, the smallest touch, sends echoes throughout life. Even an act of kindness may have more severe repercussions than you know or can see. By giving him something he has not earned, perhaps all you have helped him become is a target. Seeing another elevated often brings the eyes of others who suffer, and perhaps in the end, all you have wrought is more pain. And that is my lesson to you. Be careful of charity and kindness, lest you do more harm with open hands than with a clenched fist.
This is a fascinating idea, and had it been attempted from out of the gate, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as interesting as it is on the back of 30 or 40 years of established Star Wars fiction where the light side is good and the dark side is bad, and you're not meant to think about it any more than that. In the same way, Deep Space Nine attacks the central principles of the United Federation of Planets and the utopian vision of Gene Roddenberry, but it doesn't do it in such a way as to diminish that very positive vision. It simply holds a realist's lens to an optimist's story. It shows the flaws of the Federation and the difficulties in establishing that kind of society and maintaining it. In one of the best scenes in all of Deep Space Nine, Michael Eddington compares the Federation to the Borg, accuses them of robbing races of their individual cultural identity in order to homogenize them into the Federation.
Open your eyes, Captain. Why is the Federation so obsessed with the Maquis? We've never harmed you. And yet we're constantly arrested and charged with terrorism. Starships chase us through the Badlands, and our supporters are harassed and ridiculed. Why? Because we've left the Federation, and that's the one thing you can't accept. Nobody leaves paradise. Everyone should want to be in the Federation. Hell, you even want the Cardassians to join. You're only sending them replicators because one day they can take their rightful place on the Federation Council. You know, in some ways, you're even worse than the Borg. At least they tell you about their plans for assimilation. You're more insidious. You assimilate people, and they don't even know it.
And it's difficult not to see parts of that viewpoint when you analyze it on the whole. Every member race in the Federation flies ships based on United Earth design. The capital is Paris, and Starfleet Command is in San Francisco. Even the Vulcans, who were around before the Federation, who had warp technology before humans, seem to have become subservient to their overall doctrine in the running of the Federation. Star Trek Discovery even draws attention to this as a motivation for the Klingons, showing them declare war out of fear for losing their cultural identity as the Federation spreads. In the same way, Deep Space Nine also holds the Federation to account for its lack of preparedness for military conflict, its assumption that it can always find a pacifist solution, only to then be faced with threats like the Borg and the Dominion which cannot be negotiated with, at which point it's forced to abandon its moral philosophies and do things like build the USS Defiant. Or in the case of the fantastic episode In the Pale Moonlight, go so far as to indirectly sanction an assassination in order to bring the Romulan Star Empire into the war against the Dominion. There are countless examples like this within Deep Space Nine alone. For instance, the many colonists in the demilitarized zone who now live under the boot of the Cardassian Union simply because the Federation had to sign an unfavorable treaty for a war it couldn't fight because it wasn't prepared to. Many of these things were not deliberately set in place to be critiqued later. Nobody wrote the Federation to have holes in its ideology that could later be exploited for storytelling. It happened by accident, but Deep Space Nine took advantage of the situation to tell interesting stories. And so did Knights of the Old Republic. Star Wars wasn't doing anything wrong when it approached its story in a simplistic way with binary light and dark storytelling, but it wasn't expecting to be critiqued later either, and it's only because KOTOR saw that opportunity and exploited it that it got to tell such a fantastic story. To take another example from Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan, which is universally considered to be the best Star Trek movie and considered to be one of the best science fiction action movies of all time, only works because of the way Kirk was written in the original series. TOS portrays Kirk as a reckless, surefire, frankly quite smug captain who always comes out on top merely because the screenplay says so, and is never really forced to face any kind of difficult military command decisions, largely because that just wasn't really the kind of theme that the show had. Again, TOS wasn't doing anything wrong here, it was just telling its simple adventure story with its likeable captain character. But when The Wrath of Khan came along, the writers saw an opportunity to exploit this to tell a fantastic character story with Kirk. They made it clear that he really hadn't ever had to face a difficult decision like that, and that by cruising through life and assuming that everything will always be fine through most of his career, he was left totally unprepared for the no-win scenario that he's faced with in The Wrath of Khan.
Lieutenant, you are looking at the only Starfleet cadet who ever beat the no-win scenario.
How?
I reprogrammed the simulation so it was possible to rescue the ship.
What?
He cheated.
I changed the conditions of the test. Got a commendation for original thinking. I don't like to lose.
Then you never faced that situation. Faced death.
I don't believe in the no-win scenario.
The needs of the many outweigh
The needs of the few.
or the one. I never took the Kobayashi Maru test until now. What do you think of my solution?
Spock.
I have been, and always shall be, your friend. Live long and prosper.
Again, that story could have been told from off the bat with Kirk as a new character, introduced as someone who has a difficult time dealing with no-win scenarios, but it works 1,000 times better by using the ambient kind of passive world building and character building that had been in place before, even if that was never the point of it, to turn around and tell a fantastic story. Now, in recent years, there's been a lot of what people like to call subverting expectations in modern science fiction, done in frankly rather inept and nonsensical ways. But I think a far more just and reasonable application of the term subverting expectations is what I'm describing here, when you kind of weaponize the existing assumptions of the audience of a sci-fi franchise or any franchise in order to challenge what they think they know and tell the best possible story. Long-running franchises like Star Wars and Star Trek that have been around for 50 years, they create a lot of problems. They run into canon contradictions, they have a lot of unnecessary stories, they refuse to go away and kind of leave themselves on a high note, and it often leads to kind of fan-base toxicity. But if there's one advantage that decades-old enduring sci-fi franchises have, it's a greater opportunity to know and understand their fans, and for the extremely talented writers within those IPs to analyze exactly what will affect them most based on the assumptions they've built by experiencing their franchise over the years. It happened with KOTOR, it happened with Wrath of Khan, and it happened with Deep Space Nine, and these are all incredibly unique and fantastic pieces of science fiction that came into existence when the stars aligned like this, and the genre frankly wouldn't be the same without them. Just thought I'd point out that interesting little correlation there, the kind of shared logic between these fantastic pieces of science fiction. Incidentally, if you've not seen or played any of the things I mentioned here, please do check them all out. They are absolutely fantastic works of fiction, well worth your attention and your time. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially if you can come up with any more examples of long-running franchises that were able to take the assumptions of their audience and use them to make the best examples of their storytelling. Thank you all for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.